which is interesting because that brings us to Andy Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua. Because I can tell you why Anthony Joshua is going to knock out Andy Ruiz.
Really?
Really.
Why?
And the answer might surprise you. And it ties into what we were just talking about with Cowboy Cerrone and chasing the red panty night, right? So, there's a couple things here. I actually favored Ruiz to win against Joshua.
Uh-huh.
Then I watched something. I watched Andy Ruiz, who had a vlogger that came to his camp named Dank City. So this guy, Dank City, he came and did a 3-part series with Andy Ruiz, basically where he just followed Andy around.
Right, with all his riches that he has
Did
now.
you watch it?
Yeah,
okay, so you watched it. If you guys haven't yet, you can find it. It's Dank City, Day in the Life series with Andy Ruiz. Basically, there were a few things that Andy did that made me a bit concerned for my chunky boy. Number 1. I don't have a numbering system, but there were a few issues. The first thing that I picked up on in the very first episode, the first time that the guy is talking to Andy, he's kind of asking about the fight and stuff. Andy literally said he can't wait. He just can't wait for the fight to be over. He goes, I just can't wait for the fight to be over. That's number 1. That's not the mindset you want from somebody who is coming into the biggest event he's ever been a part of. It's the biggest spectacle. Like, the first fight, he only had 2 weeks of build-up. He was just the unknown challenger. No one really cared. They thought Josh was just going to squash him.
Right.
Now, you have a guy who's at the pinnacle, the ascension of his boxing career. Mm-hmm. For now, right?
Sure.
And he says he just wants to get the fight over with. That's not the... Like, if I was Andy's coach, that's not the attitude I would want to see from my fighter.
Okay. Now, I can't wait for the rebuttal that I'm going to make.
So, the other thing is, Andy's always been a big guy, right? He's always, I think his weight is actually one of his strengths, but the man is getting ridiculous in this camp. He literally ate pizza, hot wings, and pasta on film, and that was one meal. Mm-hmm. That was one meal.
Yeah, of course.
Which I don't have an issue with his size. It's that it's the type of junk food he's consuming. Instead of, like, good calories.
Do you think he was on the carnivore diet or the keto diet before he beat AJ?
No, but that's what I'm going to get to later. Okay. So I agree with you, right? Yeah. I think that part is likely par for the course. Mm-hmm. But I think having the longer camp on that diet is actually a lot harder. Because he had 2 weeks. He wasn't in camp. That means that, like, he didn't get beat down nearly as much, and that's where nutrition comes into play. Okay. It's in recovery. That's the thing. Like, boxers, fighters, they all say the hardest part is getting to the fight. It's getting through the camp. Mm-hmm. Now he has I think he did a 16-week camp, right? Mm-hmm. He did a full 16-week camp. That diet for 16 weeks, it's not going to allow him to, the recovery, the anabolic energy systems to be built up the same way. And I don't think it would have mattered as much for the 2-week camp. Granted, his cardio is great. His cardio is fantastic.
Are you factoring in that Andy actually fought somebody 2 weeks before the AJ fight? Or it was either 2 weeks or a month before the AJ fight?
I think it was a month.
Okay.
And because he kept his weight down in between the 2 fights, mm-hmm. and then he came back. But he was still resting. Mm-hmm. Like, he still had, like, 2 weeks-ish, right, of really good rest, and then he went back into the camp. This has been 16 weeks, no rest.
Okay.
Then, I'm concerned that this is the same thing we were just talking about. I call it like the McGregor effect, right? Where Conor McGregor, he achieved his goal, and then he doesn't really know what to accomplish next, and he sort of goes off the rails. I don't think Andy Ruiz is going to be punching any old guys in bars or anything like that, but you do get the impression that he's very happy now. Yeah. In this series, he bought $500,000. Well, more than $500,000 worth of cars in 2 days. Mm-hmm. Like, I think, and he even talked about his main motivation was making sure that he could take care of his 5 kids and his wife. Mm-hmm. Like, he talks about the wanting to buy diapers for his kids, all this type of stuff. That's his main motivation. He can do that now. And especially after the second fight, he's set for life as long as he doesn't spend stupidly. Which I don't have high hopes for, given the way this episode went. Because the episodes were like, hey, watch Andy buy stuff with like 6 dudes following him.
But he still goes to JCPenney. He still shops at JCPenney.
But he goes to JCPenney, then he goes everywhere else. And those are that's what I don't think he's going to be able to keep the right mentality going into this fight. In the interviews, he's never talked about chasing greatness. He's always been like, oh yeah, I'm gonna knock out Joshua and stuff like that. He's never said like, yeah, I'm chasing a legacy. Yeah, I'm chasing any sort of overarching goal that would drive him through this fight or through further fights.
So okay, so for the first critique of Andy, the fact that he wants the fight to be over,
Get it over with.
So I think if I was Andy, right, and I have unified all the belts. I literally knocked out the most definitive way to win a fight. He didn't just tie him, right? Like, I don't know if you've seen Andy's Instagram, right, where he like takes pictures and all that. And there's a ton of AJ supporters that are like, "Enjoy this, you fat fuck," you know, 'cause you're gonna get knocked out December 7th, you know.
Yeah.
So there's so much question whether or not he can repeat the thing over again that he definitively did. You know, all the way in June. And so I can understand his perspective of like, okay, I got to get past this fight, and then I can go on to fight Wilder. I can go on to fight Tyson Fury or something like that. And to kind of just see over him and have that validation of like, I actually am the top heavyweight in the division right now.
But that's the issue, though. He's not even saying that stuff.
Right.
That's where I'm saying my problem is.
I think Andy is a great, loving individual, but he's not a tactician. You know, he's somebody that I grew up with in LA, in high school, in the ghetto, and just like, you know, he needs some, and that's why I think his coach, I think his name is Carlos Robles or something like that. But his coach is very much like, we're continuing on with what we started, and his coach is having that vision for Andy, because I think Andy is the car, he's the engine, but the person that's driving him is his coach. And I what I hear from his coach, I hear really good things about the future, and I think he's directing Andy to that part. And even when he took a bite of that pizza, right, he's like, don't tell my coach that, right? Because he knows in the back of his head, like, that's who's holding him accountable to greatness.
But I think that's the problem, right? Is accountability from somewhere external to you can only go so far. It's like, how much have you internalized that? How to make you push just that little bit harder?
Well, no. But when he did get knocked down for the first time in his career, he
got right back up.
Right, he got right back up. And that's something that he has already, right? That like you know, like Cody Garbrandt, right? He just sees red, right? Obviously,
I don't think he even saw red. Like, I thought he was pretty.
He definitely was sound.
Super reasonable.
Right, he wasn't like winging and everything, right?
I mean, you could tell he wants to get it back, but I didn't think he was like defensively unsound or something. Right. Definitely no Cody, right?
Yeah. So and for the diet part, I don't think he's ever. So he said he was gonna get thinner and all that. He's the same weight that he fought Andy, right? So he's gonna for me, or not Andy, Anthony. So he's continuing the lifestyle that he had before the fight. And then I will say the mentality of just buying so much stuff, it does cause me alarm. But on the flip side, on his opponent's side, on Anthony's side, I don't think he believes that Andy can beat him again for the second time. I truly don't believe that.
Yeah.
And then just to go back to Andy, right? Andy is actually sparring people AJ's height, right? He's had a lot more sparring in. He's had a lot more help developing himself through the camp, and I think that's just going to further. It's going to make Andy a better fighter come December 7th.
So, I think, I don't know, man. I feel like it's just an issue where we're both gonna read into it slightly differently.
Sure.
And we'll find out, right?
Right.
And you know, the weird thing is, you could be right and he could still lose, and I could be right and he could still win.
50-50.
It really, like, the things that do make me nervous though are what I said. I do feel like you're right. Like, Andy's not a tactician, and that's also why I think that the 2 weeks really favored him, as opposed to the 16 weeks. Because he's like, oh yeah, I'll just go and I'll do what I usually do. You know, I'll just fight him. It'll be fine. And I'm sort of curious. I think that now that there's a 16-week camp that is much more favorable to Joshua and his camp,
right?
Who I would I don't know. I don't think Joshua's like the best game plan fighter in the world or something, but I think he is more tactical than Ruiz is, as far as like tailoring specifically to the opponent that they're fighting.
So Andy or AJ has never been good in close range.
Never
Been good.
Never.
And what is Andy's literal job in the heavyweight division? Getting close, right? That's all he has to do, because every single person on the heavyweight roster is going to be bigger. No, not bigger, but maybe taller than him. Definitely taller than him.
He's going to have more reach than he does.
And way more reach. So he has to implement a game plan that he's had since he was 5 years old, right? Which, at that point, do you have to be a tactician?
No, and I don't think, I'm saying, man, I think that this stacks it in Joshua's favor. I think the 16 gives a bigger advantage to Joshua than it does to Andy compared to the 2 week. Like, making them have longer to prepare for each other. I think the longer they have to prepare, the more it helps Joshua.
Sure.
Like, even with what you said, if he's been fighting these guys since forever and he's got more experience in this specific type of matchup, giving Joshua more time is more helpful to Joshua than it is to Ruiz, right? So, like, Ruiz...
Yeah, no, okay, I can agree with that.
So, I think that's part of it, and like you said, the issue that I saw in the first fight is right when Joshua knocked down Ruiz, that was the problem. He stopped maintaining his range, and he actually stepped in to try to hook with Ruiz. Ruiz didn't actually close the distance on Joshua for the first knockdown.
Right.
Joshua came in and tried to hook with Ruiz and got knocked down.
Sure.
And I think from that point on, he wasn't actually, like, cognitively there anymore. Because you see him, he didn't have the same stance anymore after the first knockdown.
He looked like when Klitschko had knocked him down.
Yeah.
He was on autopilot at that point.
He was on complete autopilot after that point. And that overexcitement is where I think the biggest issue was. And the second thing, which is Anthony Joshua's weight in that first fight, was much heavier. He was preparing to fight Gerald Miller, who is the biggest heavyweight that I've ever seen. He weighs in at 317 pounds. Like, this man is enormous.
Right.
AJ was preparing for the biggest fighter in the heavyweight division and got the smallest and quickest on 2 weeks' notice.
Right.
And I think that strength-to-strength matchup, I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, he gassed or something, which a lot of pundits are saying. The take I have, hot takes, is his stabilizing muscles in his legs, which are the hardest muscles to actually really train, and they take a long time to get used to a weight. When you add more muscle mass on, you see him, he stepped in to Andy. That was a mistake. But the real problem is once he stepped in, he lost his balance. And I think once he got excited and he tried to make that quick move and the quick step in, his stabilizing muscles in his knees and in his core couldn't actually support the weight. He lost his balance a little bit.
Okay.
And Ruiz, being the damn great infighter he was, just pop. Right? So I think now Joshua is so much smaller. He's prepared to actually, for the matchup.
He's 158 now, or is he 145? 245.
Kilogram?
yeah, sorry, 245.
Joshua, I think, it's hard, because I was looking at the stones, and who the hell uses stones? It's so stupid. English people, what the heck, man? But it's a lot of stones. I think stones are 15 pounds, and I think he's like 15 to 30 pounds heavier.
Okay.
Lighter for this fight, excuse me. Again, I don't fucking know with stones. I don't know. But he'll be lighter. He'll be more balanced. I think that in the same situation with a lighter Anthony Joshua, he's going to be able to stay on his balance more if he ends up in those infighting scenarios.
Okay.
But I will say, and Ruiz made really good reads in the fight. Joshua was on autopilot, and he was always dropping his left hand, but then from the beginning, like that was his strategy, clearly, was to come in with this stance. Then later in the fight, he started to drop his right when he jabbed. And the first knockdown of the 7th round, Ruiz read that, and when Joshua jabbed, he did a leaping left hook. Yep. And that was the first knockdown in the 7th round, and Anthony was done at that point.
Right.
He got knocked down again, but...
Right.
So I'm worried because Joshua doesn't fight well buzzed.
No, he doesn't.
And Ruiz has shown great instinctive in-fight adaptation. Like, I don't think he's a good tactician, but I think he's a great adaptive fighter. But I do think that Joshua will be able to take Andy out, because I don't think he'll put himself in that initial situation of being off-balanced in close.
Right.
Because he'll be lighter. He'll be able to stay on the outside more. He'll be able to have a little bit higher output, just a little bit. his arms won't be quite as heavy, and his legs will be able to carry and maintain his balance more effectively.
I do agree with you in the point that like he needs to be a lighter, more mobile fighter, but his hands are not going to be anywhere as quick as
No way.
Andy's.
No
right?
way.
And
he has the fastest hands in the heavyweight division.
yeah, no, absolutely.
For sure, he's got the fastest hands in the heavyweight division.
So
I feel like we're both nervous, so we're being nicer than we usually
Well,
are.
no,
I'm nervous, bro. I'm like...
I actually like both fighters a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And I feel like for both, a lot of people have been saying, especially Eddie Hearn, that like this is AJ's fight to win. And I agree to a certain degree. I agree, but I think if Andy loses this one, everybody will drop him like a hot cake.
Yeah, he's
right.
done.
Like and that's why it kind of sucks because both fighters need to win this.
Yeah, for their careers.
And their legacy, right? Like both fighters are done after this.
Like Ruiz will be Buster Douglas if he loses
Right.
this one. That'll be the narrative. Like, oh, you know, the money got to his head. No matter how the fight goes, right? The money got to his head, and then he wasn't training as hard. Blah blah blah. It was a fluke. Blah blah blah. Right. Which, to be fair, is the argument that I made, but man, it's hard because in the first fight they both knocked each other down, and Joshua, aside from the knockdown, he actually had some great moments in the fight, which I feel like a lot of people's the narrative that they're putting out is like, oh, Joshua knocked Ruiz down first, and then Andy dominated the fight after that. It really wasn't the case.
No, he was on autopilot for what, 3 more rounds? And
6. Well, he got knocked down in the second, right?
No, he got knocked down in the 7th, and then he got knocked down. And he got knocked down in the 3rd.
The first knockdown, right? The first knockdown was in the 2nd or the 3rd. I'm having trouble remembering. It was
and then
really
it
early,
7th,
man.
right?
What was it?
And then AJ got knocked out in the 7th.
Yeah, AJ got knocked out in the 7th. AJ got knocked down in the 7th, then he got knocked out. And AJ was knocked down, I think, 2 or 3. He was knocked down twice in the same round, which was the first time he got knocked down. And then he was knocked down once more in the round after that.
So let me ask you this though, because I think that this fight, more than most, is gonna either come down if AJ cannot circle out and jab Andy to death, which I think that AJ's going to want to knock him out.
I think so too.
Because he
statement
the way he talks about somebody like a Parker, right, who wants to point fight people, right? If Parker can knock somebody out, then he's gonna do it. But he's gonna point fight.
Yeah.
Right? And AJ just from how he's talked, maybe he's changed and he's just saying this because
even in the first fight, the reason that he got knocked down the first time is because he rushed in to try to finish.
Right.
To get the knockout.
Right.
Because it was kind of a similar thing where it was like, oh, this is your big showcase match for the United States.
Right.
Go get some fans, knock out the late replacement, and he jumped the gun hard.
And I think that that's just something internally in him because he plans to not have a decision.
Right.
He plans to knock people out, and that's internally in him. And I don't think because 6 months, 5 or 6 months from now, he's going to be able to change that.
I think you're right.
And I think that it's going to come down to who fights more when their legs are out, when they see spider webs in their vision, like who's going to be able to take that further? And I think Andy's always going to do that.
I think Joshua's autopilot isn't as good
as Andy's, and I don't think Andy went onto autopilot.
I don't think he did
at all in the last fight. Like if
he
anything,
didn't seem buzzed even. He was
it was almost like a flash knockdown.
Yeah.
For Andy, right? And he ate some fucking crazy dynamite right hands from AJ once he got knocked down. So it was like he got knocked out.
They looked harder than
the
knockdown.
And the right came straight onto Andy's chin. Like, oh man. And also AJ's losing weight, so it's gonna be less power.
Yeah.
And people say, well, he'll have crisper punches and stuff like that. That will be more devastating. I disagree. Mass time acceleration makes power in your punch. You know, so he's losing weight. He's probably the game plan's probably going to be for him to move around a lot, so he's going to lose even more power. And I don't think he's going to be able to get the respect that Andy needs to like back the fuck off of AJ.
Well, I think it'll be interesting because he definitely hurt Andy a few times in the first fight, but he also definitely like AJ does his best work. I'd say from like mid range, even not long range.
Okay.
Like
he's a long range fighter.
He's got but his mid range like long hooks, but they're actually because they're long hooks, they're like in the mid range.
Okay.
Anytime he was hooking with Andy at mid range, he was winning the exchanges. The times that Andy was, it was when Andy pressed into close range and was able to hook like over the top, or when he Andy would the like only punch in the mid range he was having any effect with was the leaping left hook and the overhand right.
Mm-hmm.
But AJ won most of the exchanges in the mid range until that 7th round.
Right.
So I'm really curious how the fight is going to unfold, because like you said, there is a possibility that Andy's just going to walk through it.
Right.
Like he could just walk through AJ's power and close the distance more easily because he is lighter. But it's a good fight.
And it's a great fight.
I think people are hyped for it for the exact reasons that we're going back and forth. But